Grand Canyon, Chapter 12. Brighty Goes to Work. The next day, the president and Quentin left for Washington, and life settled back into routine. But Uncle Jim felt concern about Brighty. Was he becoming a plodding pack animal, forgetting his wild ways? Had he shaken off his memories of freedom? Uncle Jim decided to make a test. If Brighty would go to work for someone else, then it would be plain that all wildness had drained out of him. What about young Homer Hobbs, he thought. Homer was the water boy for Wiley's summer camp. He was a gangly youngster with brown, doe-like eyes and arms too long for the rest of him. Though a shy one with people, he had a pet deer and a skunk and a grouse, and he seemed easy and at home with the animals. Uncle Jim made a point of arriving at the spring one morning when he knew Homer would be fetching water. "Homer," he exclaimed as he caught up to the boy, "maybe Brighty'd pack your water for you, too." Startled, the boy looked around, his brown eyes gleaming with interest. "You mean," he hesitated, "I could have Bright Angel part-time?" "Maybe, who knows? He's going to be such a work-a-day feller, he might just be glad to help a neighbor out." Homer's shyness was suddenly gone. He looked straight into Brighty's eyes and then into Uncle Jim's. "I'd like that," was all he said. "'Tain't every man I'd loan him to, but even though you're only crowdin' leavin', you're Cal Hobbs's son, and you come by your knack with animals natural. I swear I don't know what's gotten into him. Ever since he killed a lion, he's tame as a lamb." It was only a matter of days before Brighty was dividing his time between Uncle Jimmy's place and Wiley's camp. There was a handful of children at camp, and Brighty enjoyed their generosity. Every time he gave a child a ride, he was rewarded with the most delicious treats, licorice sticks or cherry drops or slightly squashed cookies. Sometimes it was a juicy apple, and before long, Brighty was hiring himself out as a child's mount. Of course he went where and when he pleased, and whatever pace suited his fancy, but his gaits were so remarkably smooth that children took to riding with their arms outspread. "Look, Ma," they would shout, "no hands." But let some grown-up climb aboard to show the children how to ride, and Brighty turned demon. At the first kick to his ribs, he took off like a bird. Then in mid-flight, he suddenly put on the brakes. The luckless man always flew over Brighty's head and landed like a frightened goose in front of him. Brighty's second-best trick was an about-face. He would be loafing along, head down as if half asleep. Then, without any warning, he would wheel and gallop off in the opposite direction. The unfortunate rider never seemed to make the turn with him, but to go forward into space, quite often ending up in a spiny bush. To make matters worse, Brighty had a way of looking back over his shoulder, showing his teeth in a wide grin. With Homer Hobbs and the children, Brighty was meekness itself, but he seemed allergic to grown-ups. Once Homer went to town on an errand, a stout, red-faced man took over his job as water boy. He brought out the tins and began to sharpen a pine twig with his knife. Brighty's eyes rolled knowingly. Quickly he backed up, screening himself in a little grove of aspen. There he stood motionless, his white nose matching the white bark and his eyes like the black bowls. The man cupped his fat hands to his mouth and shouted, "Brighty, you come here!" When the burro did not come, the man stormed into the aspen grove and whacked his way through, the pine stick almost touching Brighty's tail. "Come on, that fool Jack," he sputtered. "Where is he?" The madder he got, the more he yelled. And even though it was barely sunup, the children, some still in pajamas, came running out of tents to see what the noise was about. A sharp-eyed little girl spied Brighty and nudged her friends. They broke out in snickers at first. Then they howled with mirth. "You kids tell me where he's at!" The man lurched around. "And be quick about it!" For answer, they only whispered behind their hands and laughed louder. This threw the man into a rage. A second time he strode into the aspen grove and again passed right alongside Brighty, while the children's laughter mounted beyond control. It was one thing to be outwitted by a burro, but being laughed at by children was more than the man could bear. Snatching up the water tins, he stamped off toward the spring, muttering as he went. An hour later he returned puffing, his face purple with exertion, and there, coming to meet him, was Brighty, wide-eyed and innocent. In anger, the man threw one of the tins at the burro, who dodged as artfully as if it had been a rock slide on a canyon trail. Then he hightailed it for the meadow. Later, when the man strode over to Uncle Jim's to tattle on Brighty, there was just a hint of smile on Uncle Jim's face as he listened. "Now ain't that a fine way to do?" he said in a tone of a parent whose boy had smashed a window. "I'll have a talk with Brighty about this." But when the man was out of earshot, Uncle Jim slapped Brighty's hip in relief. "Praises be," he laughed. "If you had answered to the prodding stick, I'd sworn the world was coming to a no-good end."